Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to our presentation this evening about the Foundation Fellowship and the Bernard Ramsey Honors Scholarship Programs. My name is Cindy Boyles Crawford. I'm an Associate Director and Scholarships Coordinator, but in the Admissions Office at the University of Georgia. And I'm so excited to host some wonderful partners here at the University of Georgia from the University of Georgia Honors Program to share some great stories with you all about the Foundation Fellowship Program and the Bernard Ramsey Honors Scholarship Program, the great benefits of these two prestigious programs, and also a little bit about the application process for these to be considered for these two awards. So we're going to take just a moment or two to let our participant numbers even off here, and I'm going to share a few housekeeping details with you all. So you'll notice that your video and chat functions are disabled, but you can certainly send us questions and we would encourage you to do so. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen where you are able to submit questions, and we have a number of folks that are on the back end of this presentation that are going to be answering your questions individually and also selecting a number of your questions to present to our speakers today to help answer those questions for you. If you are joining us on your phone or on your mobile device, just tap on your screen and the Q&A function should pop up for you to be able to submit those questions to us. You do not have to wait until the very end of the presentation to submit those. You can certainly send those to us along throughout the presentation today, and we would encourage you to do that. And again, we have a lot of really awesome folks in the background that are helping to answer these questions. I do want to take a quick moment as we are still waiting. People are still logging into this presentation, which is fantastic. We're so glad to see so many of you all here with us today. But I do want to introduce our main speaker, Jessica Hunt, scholarships coordinator, all things UGA honors and fellows extraordinaire. She is fantastic. She is going to be talking with you all as well as several of our current scholars that are here today. And they're all wonderful, doing amazing things at the University of Georgia. So they're going to be sharing some of their stories that they've experienced as students here. Jessica is also going to be giving a lot of great information for you about the benefits of these two amazing programs. And then, like I mentioned before too, we're also going to be giving some detail about the application process as well. Again, please feel free to submit those questions to us through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We're excited to share information with you all about the University of Georgia, the Foundation Fellowship Program, the Bernard Ramsey Honors Scholarship Programs. Don't hesitate to send us those questions through that Q&A function. And it looks like our numbers are leveling off here. So I am now going to kind of fade away into the background and turn over the spotlight to Jessica to start her presentation. And then I'll pop back on screen to give you all some questions that you can answer from our audience. Jessica, take it away.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and thanks everybody for being here. We're really excited that there's so much interest in this scholarship, and we're really looking forward to reading all of your applications very soon. Good luck in the final, the final days before the deadline. Please, again, as Cindy said, please feel free to ask those questions. We definitely want to make sure that everyone leaves here with a real, a good understanding of how to complete that application and what the program itself offers. So you also have some contact information on this slide. Take a look, fframsey@uga.edu. Those of you who've started your applications are probably familiar with that email address. It's your opportunity for troubleshooting. So if you encounter any kind of issues, you have last minute questions, that email address is your go-to for kind of, troubleshooting those issues at the last minute. And let's see. All right. Okay, so I've used this picture as my first slide because it's the wonderful class of 2023. That's our current second year class of Foundation Fellows. And our speakers, the students who are with us tonight, are all from this class of 2023. And we were together in New York and Washington last spring break. Just a wonderful trip. And I may ask some of the students to tell a little bit more about that adventure when we get to that part of the presentation. And I just want to give you a quick taste of what the Foundation Fellows and Ramsey Scholars, what they get up to, what they do. This is one of my favorite photos of the program for wonderful students who were traveling together in Ecuador. They were doing a medical shadowing and immersive Spanish language program called Cachamsi. And what I love about that is that I remember years ago, one of the old foundation fellows found this fantastic program. It came highly recommended, but the program stated that no undergraduate students could participate. It was only for med students and med professionals. But this student was so extraordinary, she wrote to the program and said, would it be possible for me to, to participate? And the director contacted me and said, is this student for real? Because he just couldn't believe that she had accomplished all that she had in a couple of years of undergraduate study. And I said, yes, she is, and you should definitely let her participate. And he did. And that paved the way. And I think to this day, we're the only undergraduate program that ends up sending regular volunteers to Cachamsi. So that's the kind of thing that, fellows tend to be rather fearless. And the wonderful thing about the students who come after are that some of those wonderful new paths and adventures have kind of, those doors have been opened for them. And these were 4 students who traveled together on that program. And they took some time out to climb some mountains, and even in a terrible weather scenario, as you can clearly see they're experiencing in this picture, they're smiling, they're laughing, and they're having a great time together. So it's not just about, getting great training and pursuing some great professional dreams. It's also about building some wonderful friendships and the support network that is there, not just from our office, but also from within the group, from each other. And I think our current students can attest to that. But this picture says a lot. And they sometimes intern in New York. This is Avni. She was interning at the Greater New York Hospital Association. She's now a med student at Emory. And Eli Scott, who is now, in this picture, he's on the top of Mount Kenya, but he had been working in Nairobi with a project, a prisons project, that was working with incarcerated men and teaching kind of, the information they needed so that they could become their own advocates within that criminal justice system. Really interesting work. And he later went on to spend a year working in Johannesburg with a human rights law initiative. And this is Jazz Williams McLean, who as a first year, when she was 18, she went into a wonderful, with pancreatic cancer research lab at the Complex Carbohydrate Research Center at UGA. So from the age of 18, she was doing this really interesting bench research. And was able to do some pretty dramatic, profound work while she was an undergrad. Went on to Stanford to get a PhD in cancer biology, and now she's living in Washington. And this is Trisha Dallapati, who is currently doing an MD PhD at Duke University. When she was an undergrad at Georgia as a fellow, she traveled, all over the world. And one of the places she ended up doing some really cool work in was Bangkok. She was working in a lab trying to figure out new diagnostic tests for febrile diseases, infectious diseases. And she's continuing that research now within her graduate studies at Duke. And this is Caroline Shearer, who went around the world studying wildlife and habitats. And here she was in Swaziland. And later she spent a semester in New Zealand doing some research on kiwi birds. And so hopefully you get the idea of, what do the fellows do? They do a lot of different things. They come from a lot of different academic areas. They come from a lot of different states and countries. And they come together to build a community and to support each other. So the program is very much collaborative. It's not this kind of competitive, sabotage kind of environment. Instead, it's really collaborative, really supportive. Again, we're building a community, not just to support individuals, but but also to kind of support this wonderful group. And we travel a lot together. And when you're on some of these wonderful adventures, hiking up mountains, etc., you end up getting to know each other really, really well. And so our group bonds really quickly. And then we hang out in a library. We've got a Fellows and Ramsey's library that's right across from our scholarships office. It's a wonderful meeting space for book discussions, dinner seminars, studying, hanging out. And it's really one of our favorite spaces. We also get outside, like I've mentioned, and this was during Wellness Week recently. Students kind of escaped campus and went kayaking on the Broad River, which is about 30 minutes outside Athens. They also play in the snow at Myers Dorm on the rare occasion when we get snowy weather in Athens. This was last year. And this is the current class that you're going to be speaking to, the second years. But last year, when they were first years, they all lived in Myers Hall, which is the honors dormitory. And again, it gives them a great chance to get to know each other during that first year of study. And sometimes they're volunteering on campus or off. This is an old fellow, Christina Faust, who was the president of the Habitat chapter at Georgia. And Shreya Ganeshan, who spearheaded the UGA Votes initiative a few years ago, which resulted in establishing an early voting center at UGA on campus. And that's active right now. People are voting there on campus with that, the ease of that situation, because Shreya, took the initiative to promote that. And that's the kind of thing that fellows do as well. They see a need in their community, not just within campus, but also beyond campus, and they try to fill that. I know some of our students are working on a census initiative now. Christopher, you're doing that, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, done now with the census being wrapped up, but it just goes to show exactly what Jessica was talking about, is that the fellowship, FFR, Health Fellowship in Ramsey, gives you this opportunity to have this kind of collaborative community right there with you. Really, we wanted to figure out how to try to count college students to make sure that Athens received the proper funding. So getting involved with the local community as well. But because of that collaborative nature, we had like 4 of my friends who are in the FFR community. We how can we do this? And so got involved, and then just started talking with local leaders and worked on making that happen. It was a little challenging during the pandemic, of course. But I think it just goes to show that the fellowship really gives you this group of people to say, how can we, what can we do together, and how can we, be involved in our community, not only on campus, but off campus as well.
Thank you. And fellows are also engaged in the arts, and not always as majors. So this is Lauren Creer, who's currently in med school at Baylor, and she was a biochemistry major, but she, everything she didn't revolve around that academic study. She was also really involved within the community, and she was a member of the ballroom dance performance group. So just to show you, there's a pretty wide range. Students have a lot of flexibility to pursue the professional and academic dreams that they have, but also to have fun, and to kind of, pursue some things that aren't related to their majors at all. Sheena Zhang's a good example of that. She is here, she's in the radio station. She was a DJ when she was an undergrad, but her actual area of interest was green architecture. So sustainable architecture, which is what she's practicing now as an architect in New York City. And okay, so you can see that the students are doing all sorts of wonderful, interesting things. How do you become a member of this community? Here are a few details. You could take a snapshot of this slide that might be helpful. Just a few details about the application process, and we'll let some of the students chime in and give you some advice as well. Again, please ask your questions, put those in the Q&A so that we can address those. So deadline, of course, coming up November 1st. and you've all applied early action already, so you have access to the fellows application. It's test optional for the first time. And we are really excited about that because we already read applications holistically, but this will promote that even further. So it gives us a great chance to consider the full range of experiences and interests of the applicants without kind of being snagged by a test score standard. So that's exciting. GPA, we do have a suggested GPA of a 3.9, but if you're close to that and you've got questions about whether or not you should apply, I would say go ahead and apply. If you consider yourself to be an A student, then it doesn't matter if it's like 1 point off or something like that. Again, this is a suggested target. And the finalists, we read those applications in November and December, and then we notify our finalists in late January to let them know that they, are invited to the interview weekend. This year, for the first time, that the interview weekend is going to be virtual. And I'm guessing that most scholarship programs around the country are doing the same, going to a virtual scenario for their interviews just by necessity. And those are going to be taking place February 26th and 27th. So, if you're applying for this scholarship, you want to make sure that your calendar is somewhat clear, and we'll let you know in late January whether or not we're inviting you to participate in those interviews. We're going to invite about 50 people, and we usually get about 1,000 applications every year. And so, that is a small number of finalists from a large number of applications. So it is quite competitive. Nonetheless, every time we pick up someone's application, we're reading it. I don't know, this is my personal reaction, is that I'm just so glad you're all alive. I'm so glad that you're members of your communities and that you're doing all the great work that you're doing. It's very humbling to read your applications. Because what you've accomplished so far is really impressive, and what you hope to impact, in your life is also quite impressive. So it gives me hope for the future every time I read the Foundation Fellows applications every year. It's a great experience, but we do have to narrow the list down to around 50 people to interview. And all of those folks who are invited to participate in the interviews are automatically awarded the Ramsey Honor Scholarship. And the Ramseys and Fellows are together in a community, so we don't think of them as separate, communities so much. They do receive different levels of funding, however. So the Ramsey Scholars receive about half the level of funding as the Fellows. And just a couple of suggestions here, print and save your application. Most of the interview questions are going to be drawn from what you've said within your application. So it's amazing how much can change from November to February. Your major can change, just a whole lot of things. And it's really nice to kind of refresh your memory of, okay, what was it that I shared with that, with that panel? What might they ask me questions about? It's really a good thing to look back over your application to kind of refresh your memory of where your brain was, back in November. Proofread carefully, of course. Don't wait until the last minute. I know you hear that all the time, but it is really good advice. Work on your essays, put them down, and then come back to them the next day with fresh eyes. Write about, this is really key, write about what you want to do and why it matters to you and how you're preparing yourself to do it well. I would love to hear from some of the students about how they managed to do that, because clearly they did. Clearly they communicated that they had a real interest in making an impact in the world, and they weren't just sitting around and twiddling their thumbs, with that interest. They were actually acting on it. It doesn't mean that they were fixing everything that needed to be fixed within their communities, but it means that they were starting that work, with real purpose. So I don't know if anybody wants to. I know, Venetia, you had said that you had a kind of interesting research essay. One of the essays for the Fellows application asks what you would do with a year if you had the time and the resources. And so it would be great to hear, and I think Elise, you had mentioned as well, maybe if you all would jump in, Venetia and then Elise, and just tell us a little bit, just give us a quick summary of what it was you wrote about on your application.
Yeah, sure. So for some context, I'm currently majoring in economics and political science, amongst other things. And I wrote about game theory and how it applied to voting behavior. And basically, it was kind of an unconventional essay because I almost like walked through the different, possibilities and scenarios for like the 2018 midterm election, which was like happening basically like right after kind of I applied, and then I kind of predicted the election results using like game theory, and I turned out to be right, which was mainly luck, but I'm gonna say it was some skill. But I also want to emphasize that definitely print and save your application and look at what you wrote, because I like did that the night before, and literally this is kind of a funny story, but I walked in and one of the not the first question, but one of the first questions they asked me, and this was, I didn't know this at the time, but I learned later that this was the dean of like the School of Public and International Affairs. So he really knows what he's talking about when it comes to like game theory and voting behavior, right? Because that's his entire expertise, like not his entire expertise, but he knows a lot when it comes to that. So he asked me, like, and I quote word from word, "From a game theoretical lens, how would you evaluate the situation of denuclearization in North Korea?" And I'd never talked about North Korea in my essay, but I talked about game theory, so I had to know what I was talking about. So I really I tried my best, and I guess he appreciated that. But definitely know what you're talking about when you talk about it, because they will ask you.
Yeah. Good to review the application for sure. Thanks, Venetia. Elise, what about you?
Okay, so just to give context, like Venetia, so I'm majoring in marketing and data science, but at the time I applied, I was actually majoring I think I just said business and engineering. So you can definitely change along the way. You're not necessarily committed to exactly what you say on your application. But for my essay, for the research one, I talked about like food security. And so the way I kind of discussed it was I opened with kind of how it related to me and how I saw like food security affecting the community around me. And then I used the middle to kind of outline a plan in different ways that I thought would be appropriate for researching different aspects of food security that were like tangible or like feasible within like the realm of the prompt. And then I kind of closed with just the larger implications of like what that kind of research would, like how that would affect society and how I saw that playing out. So I think I just kind of systematically approached it like that. I definitely will second Venetia and Jessica, definitely review your application. I got asked, I feel like most of my questions were about my essays. And for my other essay, that was just like, tell us about yourself. I think that one is very like, you can really get creative with it and do whatever you want to. But for me, I talked about just different aspects of my interests and how I hope to tie that to making an impact in the long term. Generally, that's what I did.
Thank you. Awesome. And so Elise just mentioned the other major essay prompt within the application, and that is the kind of open-ended personal statement. And I know that Emily Shirley and I in our scholarships office have gotten a lot of questions from you all, from applicants this year. Okay, I've submitted the Common App, or I submitted the coalition application, or or the regular early action application. And can I use those same essays? Will you see the common application along with my foundation fellowship application? Well, the answer is we'll see all of it. We will see all of it. So I would suggest that when you're creating the activities lists and the honors lists on the foundation fellowship application, it's totally fine to have that be exactly what you put on the Common App or the early action application. Any of that overlap for activities and honors and experiences is perfectly fine. the most important things that you write about, your, you know, your main activities, etc., should be the same for both of those applications that you submitted. Now, when it comes to the essays, I would say be careful. While there might be some overlap in those, you know, in the essays that you submitted earlier to admissions and the essays that you put on the Foundation Fellowship application, there might be a little bit of overlap. I would suggest that you not do a copy paste of one to the other. Now, what's interesting is that open-ended, tell us about yourself, you know, personal statement prompt would allow you to recycle some of your essays that you've written for other applications, as long as those are not the essays that you sent to UGA in any form, right? So let's say, you know, some universities, well, I think Georgia has great prompts, but like Chicago, University of Chicago kind of like traditionally has some really great application essay prompts. And maybe you wrote a really great response for one of those and you'd like to use that for your personal statement. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure that it really does tell us something about you. You know, make sure that it really gives us, you know, some insight into, again, those same things, what it is you care about, the impact you want to make. I think that, and how you've already kind of like started to jump into that and figure out what that means for you, and the kind of training that you're going to need and all of that sort of thing. So I think it's okay to recycle, you know, some of those. I just think you should be somewhat careful. Make sure you don't mention other schools in those essays if you do recycle. I did one year remember reading about someone's Georgetown roommate, and I was like, oh, they really should have edited. They really should have edited that essay. It was a fun essay anyway, though. But just, you know, be a little bit careful about that. And I know, Madison, I think you mentioned that you had done a nice job of kind of being able to repurpose some of the essays that you created. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all and give the students some advice.
Yeah, so for my research essay, I also wrote about voting, similar to Venetia, and I actually wrote a senior thesis in high school about voting ID laws, and then so I kind of like got that smaller for my research essay. My personal statement was about feminism, which I had used for a similar prompt for another application. It was about a TED Talk about we should all be feminists, and that was more of a personal thing. Like I didn't talk about like academics for school at all. And then my Common App application, I used that like everywhere that I could. And it was just about like a business that I had in middle school. So I really like showed my range in all of my essays, but definitely don't create like extra work for yourself. Just try to repurpose as often as possible. Just make sure that you're again proofreading and make sure that it answers the prompt. Don't try to repurpose an essay just for the sake of doing it if it doesn't match like completely.
That's good advice. That's good advice. And I remember having a conversation with a student recently about kind of how to approach the personal statement, how to reveal something about yourself. The most important part of that is that it's clear and that you actually have something to say. I would focus on that a lot more closely than you focus on trying to be clever, you know? You don't, I kind of use a metaphor for this. You don't have to tap dance on Coke bottles, you know, you don't have to, it's not about, you know, kind of how artfully or cleverly, you know, you address the prompt. It's about whether or not what you say is really sincere and really does reflect what it is you care about and what you've been up to. If you can do that with your essays, you're in great shape. So the substance of what you have to say and who you are as a human being, it's a hard thing to communicate in 500 words, but that's what you're going for, to kind of give us a taste of you know, who you are. That's way more important than using, you know, 100, you know, fancy vocabulary words within your essay. We're really looking for sincerity and substance, you know, over superficial style. So keep that in mind, and hopefully that's comforting for you, because I'm guessing that you all have a lot to say, that you really care deeply, you know, about a lot of things, and that's what we want to hear about. So tell us what you're really thinking. that's the best thing that you could possibly do. But do proofread it, please, and pick it up several times just to make sure that you've really said what it is you really want to say. Okay, so that's good advice. Hopefully, if you do get an interview, oh goodness, please practice, because otherwise you're going to just feel, kind of somewhat shocked within the actual interview if you haven't kind of gotten comfortable, talking about, kind of what you've been up to and what you hope to do. All right, so those are suggestions. I'm going to fly through some of this other, and then kind of like, hopefully you'll have some questions about it within your the Q&A. But just a few quick things about some of the things that the fellows and the Ramseys get to do. This is one of my other favorite picks from the program, and this was on a trip to India a few years ago, and this was not posed. These guys, this is John and Alex. One is a biotech engineer for Johnson & Johnson in California, and the other is a physician who did his work at Johns Hopkins and is now an internist in Atlanta. But they're, when you're traveling on these trips together, you have all these wonderful moments, these pockets of time to hang out. And sometimes you're talking about something that's really profound, meaning of life type stuff. And sometimes, you're talking about your favorite, television show or something like that. It can be whimsical, or it could also be, really serious. But you've got that time, and those opportunities to get to know each other really well. And so this was one of those great moments that the photographer caught with a kind of, a long lens. And but okay, so here's how they do all those things. The fellows benefits include a really great semester stipend, 8 semester stipends, so 4 years, and it approximates the cost of attendance. It's not perfect. It's not perfectly calibrated to do so, but it comes pretty close. You can see the amount that students receive for their stipends in-state, out-of-state. And for those of you who are international students, you also get an additional stipend that covers the cost of your health insurance. So I think we have some students from Jamaica on the call, and I know that that Jordan Theoc is here. Jordan, is there anything in particular that you would advise international students as they're applying?
I don't think there's anything specific. I think the application for international students is going to be pretty similar to normal students. And as you said, there's an additional stipend, so that will kind of help to balance out the cost of attendance, and that will kind of make up for the cost of having to pay for healthcare, because that's something you have to pay attention to. And that's something definitely when you're coming here, you should look at to make sure that that's something you're paying for. But I think besides that, it's pretty straightforward. It's the same as everybody else. And it's definitely a really good thing to get that additional stipend. So at the end of the day, what I'm getting is comparable to what everybody else is getting. And I think that's something that's really amazing. And that's something that they show that they're kind of looking out for us. And I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Yeah, at first we were unaware of that additional cost. And like Jordan said, we really do want to look out for our students. So one of the students mentioned it to us just kind of offhand. And we were like, I mean, Emily and I sprang into action really quickly because, again, we just want to take care of our students really well. So that was instituted just about, I guess, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And again, on the, prompting, of some of our international students. Now we've also, you can see that the out-of-state students receive a really generous stipend because they don't have tuition scholarships like the in-state students do who are on the Zell and Hope scholarships. But they also receive an out-of-state tuition waiver, which is wonderful. So that really, in the end, both in-state, out-of-state, and also international students are all kind of, we're trying to make sure that their expenses are covered in the same way. So, and I know we've got at least one out-of-state student on the call. That's Melita, who's from California. Any suggestions? I mean, we're so glad that you were drawn to UGA from West Coast. Any suggestions for those out-of-state applicants?
I mean, you have to be aware that a lot of applicants from all over the country are applying, but a lot of people are from Georgia. So it's really nice to like, this is like after applying. I mean, the application process is basically the same, but if you do get into the fellowship, there's a lot of people from Georgia, but it's just such a variety. Like everyone has different interests, and it feels like you really feel at home. It was probably my favorite thing in the world that when I first came to UGA in the beginning of last year, it wasn't like I didn't have anybody there. Like I had my FFRs, I had that community already there. So that's really, really wonderful. I really encourage you to apply as an out-of-stater, because you immediately go into UGA with just this like awesome community. I remember late nights in the dorms before school started. We stayed up to like 3 a.m. We like sat in circles, played cards. It was absolutely lovely. So that's definitely a huge benefit. So.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's made a difference this fall, amid, kind of a very different college experience, within this pandemic. And it's really helped the first years, I think, this year, because they did feel like they had that support system coming right in, and that was really wonderful. So it's helped their transition to college life, under difficult circumstances this year. But even under the best of circumstances, it's a difficult transition to make, from leaving home and then, moving into this kind of college world. So, having this wonderful community supporting you really makes a difference. Okay, so benefits, again, we get to know each other really well because we travel together. So you can take a look at some of the travel that students do either for spring break, domestic and international trips. Also, first year Maymester at the University of Oxford, studying with Oxford professors. Just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful trip. And those that you can see that we've given you kind of approximate values for those experiences, and those are completely separate from the semester stipend. So the semester stipend support is to cover your regular college expenses, and all of this other group travel that we do together, we cover completely, so that the burden, of paying for any of that is not on any of the students' shoulders, and it's completely separate from the money that they receive to support their regular semester experiences. We go on retreats together too, which are awesome. And so there's some of the folks studying a few years ago at Oxford in front of the RadCam. And also interning in Washington, D.C., 2 of the students from the class of 2020. And these were some 2020 folks as well. They were traveling to Tanzania for spring break. They were studying ecotourism there and wildlife conservation issues. They took time out for some great photos, and there are a lot of lions in the photos. They were on a 4-day safari in the Serengeti, staying at a wild camp that week, and obviously having a great time. And Dr. Hyunsoon Yi takes us almost every year on a wonderful spring break trip. This is one of the most special that she's hosted, and that is a trip to South Korea to visit and stay in the temples with Buddhist nuns. Dr. Yi's academic focus is Korean Buddhism. And this, communicates to our travelers, our students, just really in such a special way, what the life of Buddhist nuns is in Korea. And they get a chance to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and perform the vows and that sort of thing. And just, it's a really wonderful experience. She's also taken us to Vietnam and to Japan on other occasions, and also to Mongolia one summer, which was a really tremendous trip. Emily and I got to tag along on that trip too, which was great. Other benefits, sometimes they want to get away from each other. Sometimes, it's wonderful to travel together, but sometimes they want to go off and pursue their individual dreams and interests. And so we give them the funding to do so. So each student receives $9,000 in travel grant money and also $1,750 in research and conference funding. And the students use those for a kind of broad and wide variety of study abroad or internships, or sometimes it's a coding boot camp. Sometimes it's, we had a student who did research on salamanders and went up to North Georgia every weekend to trap salamanders and to conduct some research there. So, I mean, you can really use this for a lot of different purposes. So I don't know, students, if y'all want to chime in, anybody, like, give us maybe one thing that you're intending to spend your individual funding on. Just jump in and talk over each other. Doesn't matter. Who wants to start?
I can go ahead.
Okay.
Once travel opens back up, I'm planning on using part of the stipend to go on the Terry to South Korea trip, because I'm a finance major, and they offer really, really cool trips where you spend the first, I believe, 2 weeks just traveling and taking 2 Terry courses that correspond with the International Business Co-Major. And the remaining 4 weeks are an internship. And so I think that's definitely like what I'm aiming for to spend that money on.
Yeah, awesome. Wonderful choice. And you did some remote interning in China last summer too, didn't you?
In Japan.
In Japan.
Yeah.
Awesome. All
Yeah.
right.
During the pandemic, I did a remote internship and I used a little bit of that stipend for that. So that was really good.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else want to jump in? Any plans? I know a lot of our plans have been stalled, with travel restrictions as they are, but again, once it opens up, we do have big plans.
I can add, I'm planning to study in Cortona and do the art program there this summer, and also use those credits to go towards a studio art minor. So I'll be in Italy for, I think, about 8 weeks this summer.
Oh, brilliant. And we're all going to come visit you.
Yes.
So, awesome. Well, jump in if anybody's got any other suggestions. I can share what some of these other students have used their funding for, but anything else?
I'm hoping to go to Ecuador soon. One of my friends from the fellowship and I hoping to go soon, but have a exchange program there. But I mean, there's students, like there's a student who did research in the past. Her name was Zoe Lee, did research like at the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague. So that there's also opportunities to use it for that. So lots of different ways things can be applied.
Absolutely. And sometimes for credit. I know what you were thinking about in Ecuador would be for credit, but then when Zoe went, it was an independent project, not for credit. So again, you got a lot of flexibility. Nobody demonstrates that better than Nico Leese, who's on the screen now. Nico ended up using a good bit of his stipend, his extra funding to go. He was in Idaho for a summer working with the Student Conservation Corps, and basically, working in the backcountry, creating trails, where there are no more than 2 people, like for, just miles and miles and miles. He would go for weeks without seeing anybody, basically. And then the resupply, flight would drop, food, etc., for him. But that really inspired him. And he, I think, is going to be an outdoorsman for the rest of his life. When he just graduated in May, his dream was to do the Pacific Crest Trail. And he began that adventure this summer. Unfortunately, they were pushed off the trail by wildfires after he had made it through, I think, into his 3rd or 4th state. He had to curtail that. So he's going to have to go after the PCT another year. But he made a really good dent in that dream, already. So really exciting. So yeah, you can use your funding to to work in all sorts of endeavors. Jessica Ho, and you saw her earlier in that picture from Ecuador. She's at Columbia Med now. But Jessica, interestingly enough, did the Double Dogs program and did an undergraduate major in, I think, biochem or biology, and then her master's in public health at the same time, and ended up finishing both of those in 4 years' time. Full funding, throughout. And another thing, of course, that I think our program is known for is, again, that level of support, from each other. We have peer mentors, bigs and littles, and we also get together for lots of discussions. We eat you know, really well. We, you know, we found that food is a big draw for college students to participate in book discussions and that sort of thing. So catering is a big part of our budget. And we also are encourage faculty mentoring and also the staff. So Emily, I don't know if you can see her on screen, but Emily and I are kind of the staff members in the scholarships office, and we're available to help students troubleshoot, you know, all sorts of, you know, bureaucratic hurdles, but also when they're trying to figure out what to major in. Madison and I just had a great conversation about, you know, kind of like how she's going to balance a lot of different interests and you know, and kind of like fulfill a lot of different major requirements across disciplines. She's got a great plan. But it's really kind of fun, I think, for the students to have these great resources, these human resources on campus to reach out to, you know, when they've got questions or, you know, they want to bounce ideas around. And what's great is that Emily and I have seen so many students kind of go through these similar, you know, kind of wrestle with these similar questions. And we've seen alumni do all sorts of cool things. And so we can often make some great recommendations to the current students because, again, we've seen what's possible. And this is just a great shot from one of the dinner seminars that we held a few years ago. And Dr. Hunter Camp, who's in the Department of Religion, and he takes us almost every year to Morocco. And this is in his home, you know, kind of like engaging with students. And one of the great things that we, you know, as part of our program, we benefit from, you know, being a part of the University of Georgia and connected to its faculty. And I don't know how this developed, but it did. The faculty just love working with undergraduate students, and they're just so open to mentoring them through research projects and you know, just kind of being a resource. We're just every day surprised and just overwhelmed by how available our faculty, our just brilliant faculty members are to undergraduate students. It's a wonderful thing. And I would encourage every student on this call to seek that. You may not end up at UGA. I mean, we hope you all do, but if you don't, it's okay. Wherever you end up going to school, make sure that you've got, you know, those opportunities to engage with faculty, you know, that they're open, you know, to those overtures from, you know, from undergraduate students. We're really lucky on our campus. It's a wonderful thing. So, and I think I've kind of covered all the kind of major bases. I know we've got lots of questions, and so I'm going to pass it back over to Cindy Crawford to see, you know, what questions, you know, are there for us and for our students to field. Thanks so much for being here, y'all. It's been great.
Thank you for that presentation. That was wonderful. And thank you to all the students that are here joining us today and brought your perspective and your stories with you and your advice as well. And that is a great prep because some of our questions are going to be advice that these applicants are seeking from you all. I'm going to cover two quick things that we're getting. They're kind of application logistical questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover those really quickly before I present some of these questions that we've gotten. And thank you to everyone for sending us these questions. The first is about accessing the application itself. So to all of our students logging in, I'm actually putting a link right now in the chat function here. So the way that you access the fellowship application is through the admissions website and under the Foundation Fellowship information. On this page, if you scroll to the bottom, there is a big red button that says apply now. So just click on that and you'll be prompted to log into your status check and you'll be able to select the Foundation Fellowship application from there. So that's how you access the separate application. The second question that we're getting a few about in the chat function is about sending in additional recommendation letters. If you'd like to send in recommendation letters, there are not extra ones that are required for the Foundation Fellowship application. We will use everything that is submitted for your admissions application. That will be automatically matched to your fellowship application as well. But if you are still sending in those recommendation letters, you can send those how you would normally send recommendation letters to admissions, and they'll be automatically matched up to your fellowship application. And so that can be through the high school counselor portal online, through Naviance if your school uses that system. Also, your recommenders can just email those to fframsey@uga.edu, and I'll be glad to match those up to your applications. But I want to make sure to get to some of these questions that we've gotten from the group. And so the first question is really great, and I'm going to maybe ask for 2 students here to answer this. Maybe Elise, if you could start us off. The question is, what do current fellows feel most prepared them in high school for this program?
Okay, so I guess just in thinking about that question, and what I was up to in high school, I think a lot of how I felt prepared for FFR was less like what I did and more just like reflecting on what that meant to me and how that has shaped who I am now. So like I remember talking about in my interview, for example, leadership in cross country. I'm not trying to be a professional runner or anything, but it was reflecting on how my experience in cross country and track, and as I was an upperclassman, like what leadership on that team looked like and how I grew as a leader through that experience, and how those lessons, I plan to use those in my future. So I think generally what I would suggest is taking time to really reflect on how you're doing has affected you and how you've grown through those experiences more than what the actual experience is.
Excellent. Could we call on maybe one more to give us their advice for that quickly?
Sure, I can go. I think something that's really important when doing this is, of course, just get involved. I think at your school, it's really good to just be involved in different clubs. I think FFR really is a community, and if you're used to being involved in different communities, that's something that's gonna really help you in terms of the application and just overall while being in FFR. And then I think you should just really right now, I know there's a lot of stress going on with the application process, but take a step back and kind of relax and do what you love and do what you enjoy, because also the interview and also the application is talking about yourself and what you enjoy. And when talking about that, you can't talk about schoolwork. You can't say, oh, I love doing homework. Nobody loves doing homework. Talk about what you actually like to do. Go out and do what you like to do. So I talked about photography because that's something I actually like to do. And it's about being yourself. Nobody wants a robot. We want an actual person. So just do what you love and just get good at expressing that. Excellent
advice. Thank you so much. The next question is going to be, I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. Jessica, this is a new year for us as being a test optional institution for this upcoming year. And so we've had a number of questions about that, and maybe a little bit of concern too. Could you just maybe speak to test optional and how that's going to work in the Foundation Fellowship review process again a little bit?
Absolutely. And, I think it's really important for applicants to feel completely confident that test optional means test optional. And that means that we would not penalize you for not submitting your test scores. We're not going to read anything into that. We're not going to try to figure out what your rationale was or your situation, if you were able to get to testing centers, etc. We are going to take your application as you present it to us, and we're going to try to just get to know you as a person and as a student. And test scores, I think, for a long time have kind of provided, they're just a kind of quick and easy mechanism, aren't they? A standard. But, the reality is that test scores are not completely objective, assessments. There are cultural biases, that are at play. And frankly, we're very excited that we're going to be somewhat liberated from that this year. And that a student who, let's say we had a baseline of let's say like a 1470 on the SAT as a base. But let's say you were a student who made a 1460. And then you were like, well, now I can't apply because I don't have I'm 10 points away. But we missed a chance to get to know you. We missed the opportunity to get to know you because of that barrier. And we're excited about removing that barrier. And if you got great test scores, well, that's awesome. I mean, we'll look at those and we'll be impressed, as you probably were when you opened up the envelope or whatever, but we are not going to use that as any kind of main measure of, we're going to really look at people's complete applications. That's why the application essays are going to be important. And again, not that you write the most creative, brilliant, essay of all time, but that you express some really sincere, interests and experiences, that you really tell us who you are. That's how we're going to make our decisions this year. Now, we still want you to be a great student, of course, right? So we're going to look at your transcript. We're going to read your reference letters to see, how your teacher, has raved about your performance in their class, that sort of thing. So we are going to look at those academic performances, and we'd love to see that you were, a leader in your school. Doesn't mean you have to be the president of the student government or anything like that, but just that you were engaged, that you cared. And just like Jordan said, that you were involved. We do like to see that. And that takes a lot of different forms. People were involved in all sorts of experiences. And I know, Elise, you were involved in theater and that sort of thing too. And, and that was really super, super interesting. But, Christopher, you were a journalist, I believe, kind of a student journalist, in high school. And we didn't say that Elise's theater, experience was higher than Christopher's journalism experience. We looked at you as a whole human being to see why you decided to do those things and what you got out of them. So, this is a little bit vague, but I do think our process is going to be a little bit, it's not going to be kind of so cut and dried, it's going to be, just kind of trying to get to know students as well as we can from reading their materials, and not letting that test score kind of be a barrier to getting to know you. So yeah, we're really thrilled. We really are, but it is definitely, we're charting some new territory this year. So I'll have a better response next year, once we've actually gone through the process, but it's made us, train our application readers really carefully. So that we, even, as a test optional, endeavor this year, we're all kind of on the same page as readers. I hope that helps. I don't know if that answered that question completely, but.
It was wonderful. Thank you, Jessica. And so our next question, and we have time for just maybe a few more, really quickly, is from Kaylee, and she asked a really good question. She's planning to major in cognitive science and artificial intelligence. Are certain majors more or less likely to be selected for the Foundation Fellowship?
I think the students could answer this question just from looking, within their class cohort, and they can say that the full range is represented. So no, we're not looking to choose only pre-med students, or to choose only pre-law students, or pre-business, or artists, or no, I mean, we really want you all. We really do. So we do not privilege any particular major or academic focus. We're, again, just open to, it is exciting to have a full range of academic focuses, within the group, because then students get to inspire each other in different ways once they come together as a group. But no, we don't give more weight to any, no, absolutely not. Although I've got to say, cog-sci and AI is super cool. And a whole lot of students, as you can imagine, are really fascinated by that area of study and are embracing those majors. And a whole lot of the fellows in Ramsey's are pursuing bachelor's, master's, the double dogs, degrees, concurrent bachelor's and master's degrees. And a lot of them are going the AI route as the master's degree. And it's, I think they're having really good experiences. So, but no, we did not, pick people based on their majors at all.
Great. I think we have time for one more question before we wrap things up. And I so appreciate everyone sending in their questions. And thank you to our teams that are behind the curtains, answering the questions individually and kind of picking which ones might be good for the whole group. But we did have a question about working with Curo and how that might be different from the foundation fellows or regular student experience. So maybe different from a non-fellows experience in Curo, or even if there is a difference or not in working with those research experiences. Could you speak to that a little bit before we wrap things up?
Well, students can do, any student on the UGA campus can participate in undergraduate research through Curo. It's wonderful, but I would love to hear from the students. So I don't know, Venetia, you've done some research, haven't you? I mean, probably all of y'all have done research at some point. Some of it's policy research, some of it is in your, your major area. I don't know if y'all can speak to any of the independent research you've conducted through Curo.
Well, I did do research last year, but it actually wasn't through Curo, and that's a way that you can pursue research if you don't necessarily want to do it for credit. You can still do research by just like approaching a professor that you have similar interests with and asking them, like expressing interest, and then, typically professors are receptive to, students' help. But that, I mean, I can't speak for the official like Curo experience, but I found my research to be really valuable and helpful in me kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life as well. So, but I researched with the econ department.
All right. That's a good point, that you can do it sometimes for credit and sometimes not for credit. Sometimes you can even get paid to do it. That's lovely. Anybody else want to chime in about their undergraduate research experiences? Just kind of.
I can add, I got the Curo Research Assistantship for this semester. So that is an additional stipend from UGA to fund a undergraduate research experience with a professor. So I'm actually working with a professor in Grady on a project, which is the School of Mass Communication and Journalism. And that's a project focused on misinformation and crisis communication. But I would just say overall, it's been a really interesting and exciting experience because I've gotten to explore topics that are so related to my areas of interest, but also that are outside of the colleges that I'm in on campus, and also just getting to know a professor more. So I found it to be a very enriching experience and I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I would just add, so I haven't actually done any research, although I'm getting ready to do, I'm in this class called the Security Leadership Program within International Affairs, and we do research in our second semester, so I'll be starting some in the spring. But I would just add that that's one of the really cool things about going to such a kind of thriving and big school as UGA is that there's, a possibility to connect with professors from all different kinds of fields. As Elise, points out, something that's not, directly, in her major. It's fun to talk to all my friends and hear about, are they doing research in like early childhood education, or, are they doing research and whatever is available, and whatever connections they can make with professors at UGA.
All right. Thanks, y'all. I just want to thank the students so much for being here. They're wonderful. And they spend a lot of time on Zoom these days. So it's lovely that they volunteered their time to join y'all tonight. Cindy, is there anything else we need to do before we wrap up?
Only that if you still have some questions that you'd like to ask us, please be sure to send those questions to fframsey@uga.edu, and we will be glad to help answer those. And I just appreciate everyone being involved. Thank you to the FFR community for taking time out this evening to join us today. Thank you for the students that are joining us remotely and at home. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Jessica, for sharing all this wonderful information and your support of these amazing students and all the cool things that they get to accomplish. So just appreciate all of you all for participating today. And with that, I only have 2 words left to end our program tonight, and that is go dogs.